Hello, welcome to an all new Speed Reviews. This is the series where I follow up on products I've been testing for the last few months, give you my final thoughts on whether I think they are worth it or not. I'm so excited to say that this portion of today's video is sponsored by SeatGeek. One of my big goals for 2024 was to focus on experiences over things, whether that means going to a concert, a sporting event, etc. And if that's one of your goals as well, SeatGeek gave me a discount code to get 10% off your next purchase, and that applies whether you have used the site before or not. So even if you are not a first-time shopper, you can still get the 10% off with my code for a limited time. The code is Kelly10 at checkout, and your purchase with SeatGeek is backed by their guarantee. You can even return your ticket ahead of time with swaps. So again, no matter how many times you purchase through SeatGeek, you can still use my discount code Kelly10 for 10% off. That is up to a $25 discount. So thank you so much to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video, and let's jump into it. In today's video, I'm going to split these products up into 3 different categories. I'm going to start with the products that I do not recommend. And I try to be rather picky when it comes to my reviews, okay? I don't want to be negative, but I do want to be critical because there is just so much makeup out there. I really want to be discerning about what is good versus great, and that's why I like to split these off. So the bottom category is for the stuff that I really don't recommend. The middle category is where the bulk of these products fall, and that is for products that are okay. It's like, you probably won't be disappointed, but I'm not like shouting from the rooftops about them. But that's what the final category is about. The last part of the video is where I will share my favorites out of everything that I've been testing for the last few weeks or months, and I'm gonna save that for the end so we can end things on a high note, okay? But let's jump into it. So starting with the nose, like I said, the reformulation of the Umbra sunscreens from Drunk Elephant are not great, okay? So they relaunched this formula. They were supposed to have redone it. It's still not a good formula. Like it wasn't ready to be launched again. Like we could really go back to the drawing board on this. They launched in 3 different shades. One is like a whitish pink, one is a light tan, and then they do have a deeper tan. Now, I applied a mixture of these 2 today in the demo clips, and I'm normally a little bit hesitant to, actually not even hesitant, I don't mix sunscreen because you're really not supposed to. It can affect the formula, but my understanding about these is that they are all the same formula. They just have a different like pigment added to them, so you can kind of mix and match them, which is what I chose to do today. But even still, what I don't like about this formula is the texture and the consistency. It is so thick. Like think of an old school sunscreen. Yes, it blends into the skin better than an old school sunscreen, but the thickness and that almost paste-like texture is still here. Like nothing about this feels elegant. And honestly, for Drunk Elephant, for the price point and for the rest of their line, it felt like a really big disappointment to me. I don't recommend these, especially against all the other great sunscreens on the market, especially a lot of new tinted sunscreens that are launching. These are not worth it. These are just so greasy. When you saw me applying them in the video that I first tested them out, my face was so shiny for the entire video. So many of you were commenting like, yeah, that just looks greasy. It's thick, it's sticky. If you're applying enough to get the sun protection, I don't see you liking the way that this sits on the skin. It's just heavy, heavy, heavy. One that I wanted to like, I wanted to love this, but I don't. The e.l.f. Soft Glam Satin Foundation has been a dud for me, and I debated putting this in the middle category of like okay products, but even when I'm looking at the other products that I did throw in that category, this is so much beneath them. Like I don't really like this. So this, first of all, I was hoping it would be kind of like an updated version of their Seriously Satin foundation that I used to love, but I just don't find that to be the case. This looks makeup-y. It looks very dry on my skin. Granted, I have dry skin, but generally I still do prefer foundations and just finishes in general on most of my products that sit down kind of matte. So this seemed right up my alley because it is satin. I thought maybe it would still look nice on my dry skin, but give me more of that mattified finish, but that was not my experience at all. Even right now, I did these demo clips. I filmed these over like the last hour, hour and a half, got up, ate lunch, and then I'm looking in the mirror at my chin, and it is just so dry looking and separated. Like you can see the way the foundation is attaching to all my hairs on my face. It's definitely not smoothing over any spots of texture. I know that it's very affordable, and that's part of the reason I wanted to love it, but in terms of drugstore foundations, like there are better ones out there. I wouldn't recommend trying this. Okay, a little bit of a controversial one, but I was not a fan of the liquid bronzer from Makeup by Mario. So I purchased mine. This is their Soft Sculpt Bronzing and Shaping Serum, okay? So I purchased mine in the shade Fair. And I do want to note, I have the shade Fair in their bronzer stick, and it's a perfect shade match for me. So I want to throw that out there now. This shade like would be my shade, but this formula is so sheer. Once you start to blend it out, it's kind of like it's just disappeared. So I find myself having to build up a lot of this. And yes, by the time I do that, I can make it work and I can achieve a result that I like, but I don't find it as effortless as a lot of my other liquid bronzers, especially considering how many liquid bronzers have launched in the last couple of months. This is not a formula I would be highly recommending at all, especially considering how much more expensive this one is than all the others that recently launched. Now, you do get a ton of product with this. It is 1.01 fluid ounces, but I don't even necessarily consider that a pro for this product when I think about how much of it I have to use. Like, it kind of cancels out. The fact that there is a lot of product is nice in theory, but I have to use a lot of product to get just a normal look. So it's really a wash when I'm considering how much product is in here. I do think it's cool, I suppose, that it has the double packaging where you have the doe foot on one side and the pump on the other. But I really never use the doe foot side because the product is so sheer. If I try to just use what is on the doe foot, it's not enough product. I have to take a lot of it. So what I end up doing almost every single time is pumping it out on the back of my hand and then taking it on my brush and applying it. But even the texture of this, it's very like thin and gel-like, so it kind of gunks up my brush in a way that I don't like. This is a no for me, okay? I do have another Makeup by Mario bronzer that I will recommend later that I think is so much better than this, and the price is like the same. So skip this and get that one, but stay tuned, stay tuned. The Patrick Ta highlighters, these were not very well received. Most people really hated these, and I thought maybe they were going to grow on me. That has not been my experience. And even today, when I was separating out the categories, I debated popping this into the okay category. But what stopped me was how expensive these are for just kind of being okay. You know what I'm saying? With his blushes that are in the duo and the bronzers, I know that those are expensive as well, but I think the formula justifies it. For these, it's a pretty average, if not subpar formula, and considering how pricey they are, it just didn't feel right recommending them even in the like okay category. But these highlights have the two formulas, just like all his other products. We've got the powder and the cream, and it's interesting because these are both the most subtle highlights ever, but also the least natural looking highlights ever because they're so sparkly. So it's like the worst of both worlds. I don't know, like I do like a subtle highlight, but this kind of also isn't a subtle highlight because it's so glittery. So the powder has so much sparkle in it, and the cream side, I was expecting to be the same formula and consistency as his other cream products. I thought it was gonna feel just like the blush or the bronzer. It is a completely different formula. Think of wax. Like, it's just straight up wax. Very dewy, balmy, but not in a good way, in a way that you feel like your hair is gonna stick to it and it's never fully dried down, you know? All that being said, I do feel like there's a way to use these and achieve a really gorgeous editorial look. Like, the more I've played with them, the more I've kind of understood their purpose and what they work well with, you know, in terms of like a look I'm trying to achieve. But I think for the average person looking for a highlighter, you will probably be disappointed by these. Like, I don't recommend them. But now we're moving into the products that are okay. You know, they're not bad. I wasn't super disappointed by them, but they weren't major standouts for me. They're not products that I'm necessarily reaching for over other things in my collection. Like, they're very much okay. And we'll start with the internet's current favorite, the Pocket Blushes from Rhode. I've actually been a little bit surprised by the popularity of these because while I don't dislike them, I guess I just don't get it. So these come in 6 shades total. My first critique really is just the packaging. This feels so drugstore to me. Like, yes, the look maybe feels kind of like minimal and almost futuristic, how like rounded it is, but the weight of this is non-existent. This is so, it just feels so cheap. The packaging is also a little bit deceiving because there's a lot of wasted space around here and on the inside, making the product appear larger than it is. But I want to note 0.18 ounces. The Milk bronzer sticks, this tiny little thing that everyone roasts for being so small, is 0.19 ounces. More product than this. Like, this is just very deceiving with a lot of excess packaging, but there's not much product in here. That being said, I do like the shades that they selected. I like how muted that they are, and I like that there are a lot of nudes, and especially a lot of nudes in like different skin tones. The shade in particular that everybody's raving about, that I'm pretty sure sold out, that I've been seeing in like every video, this is like the favorite shade, is this one. Toasted Teddy, and I've seen a lot of people mention that they use this all over the face, kind of as like a bronzer, even as a lip product, or even as an eyeshadow. And I will say I did that a little bit in the demo clip so you could see how this applies, but I had to really shear this out because this shade is too deep for my skin tone. So I know I've been seeing everyone talk about this as like an all over the face shade, but if you are around my skin tone, this won't work for that. It's definitely better on like at least a medium skin tone. That being said, I think the shade Freckle kind of serves that same purpose if you do have lighter skin and you wanted that all over shade of like blushy bronzer type of all-in-one product. So this formula really took me by surprise. It is so emollient, like one of the most creamy blushes that I've tried, which sounds like it would be a pro, and at times it can be, but I almost find it like a little bit too emollient to the point that it blends outward. Do you know what I'm saying? It doesn't stay in place. So let's say I put it down and you can definitely like move it around on your brush. It's not necessarily gonna stay concentrated in that spot. It's like it can be moved around easily in a way that can be helpful and can not be great, if that makes sense. So I find that results occasionally in it looking a little bit patchy. And I tried to show that in the demo clips, the way the blush looked on my hand after picking it up and then applying it. Like, you could see on my hand where there was kind of a big patch missing, and then around the sides there was a little bit of blush blended out. I felt like the hand was visualizing what can sometimes happen on my face. Like, it ends up going patchy just because it's so creamy. So my recommendation would be to pick this up directly on a brush instead of applying it to your face, but that is my recommendation with most cream products, and by most, actually I mean all. That's what I do with pretty much everyone. This has a very dewy, balmy finish, which is not my personal preference, but I do know a lot of people really love how alive it looks on the skin. So these haven't turned out to be favorites for me based on everything I mentioned and my own preference of wanting something a little more like satiny matte. But I do know a lot of people have been liking these, so I could see it going either way. You know what I mean? Again, it's okay. It's not the best cream blush on the market by any means, but it's definitely not bad either. Okay, time to update you on the Kosas blushes. I tested these out on camera a while ago, and I feel like I've like briefly mentioned them since then, but I haven't had an official update on them, so I wanted to share that today. This is the Blush is Life formula. These are their baked blushes, and I thought that these were gonna be a new favorite formula for me, and they're really just okay. If anything, I don't reach for them nearly as much as I anticipated that I would. You know, I've had these for months now and I don't gravitate to them all that often. So something I find a little funky about this formula is that the shades vary so much. Some of them are much more glowy than others. Some of them are a little bit more matte, but I would say consistently they all have somewhat of a sparkle to them, which I don't love. So they are glowy blushes, like I'm saying, but when you see it in the sun, you can kind of see a sparkle. I was hoping these would be a lot closer to like the Hourglass Baked Blush formula. It's not as smooth or refined as that. It definitely emphasizes texture, and again, some of the shades are a lot more glowy than others. There's not much consistency there. I think that's partially because of the swirl. They're just not nearly as smoothing as I would want from a powder blush, so they haven't turned into favorites for me. The Milk Brow Gel. This one I have actually really liked, but I know overall the review has been mostly negative on these, but I want to share why I kind of like this for my brow type, okay? So this is the Kush High Roll Brow Tint. Different than the Kush Brow Gel that they had previously, this is supposed to be a tubing formula. You know, tubing is the buzzword right now. I don't really understand how this is a tubing formula, if I'm being so honest, because with a tubing mascara, you see the actual tubes come off. With this, I would just say it's like a firm hold brow gel, but I'm not noticing tubes when I'm washing my face off. Like, I don't know, maybe it's forming tubes around my eyebrows, but it doesn't act that much different than a normal brow gel for me, though I would say it's a little bit more stiff. So it's gonna lock them in place, almost like a hairspray finish. And I think that's partially been the reason this hasn't been super well received. That, in addition to the fact that it can get a little bit messy to apply. It has a lot of shades and they're all very pigmented, and the formula is pretty thin, and so it's easy to accidentally get it on your skin, especially considering how short that the bristles are on the spoolie. So sometimes I can get a little bit on my skin. I feel like I have to go in with my nail and kind of clean that up. But what I like about this is that it makes my sparse eyebrows look so fluffed up. It gives them so much volume. And that's why I think this works well for me, but I could see it not being very loved on someone that has thicker eyebrows and is more so seeking out a brow gel for hold and lift. Those are not my concerns with the brow gel. My concerns are more so giving pigment and a little bit of shape to my brows because my natural brows are very light and sparse. So this, I think, bulks them up and adds volume with the tint, but they're definitely locked in place. They're not gonna budge, they're there. So personally, I have enjoyed this and I've been reaching for it pretty much every single day since I got it. Actually, in the beginning, I didn't think I liked it. There was a bit of a learning curve, and once I figured out how to best use it for my brows, which is, you know, just applying a very small amount, I've been hooked. So I don't think it's going to be for everyone, but for the right person, it adds a really great amount of volume. e.l.f. launched SPF lip glosses, okay? And I think I don't like this shade. I think that's most of it. Maybe I need to pick up another shade because the formula is not terrible. But the shade that I have is, I was like, I can't read this. e.l.f. writes their things so small on here. The shade is called Blush Much. And these are all relatively pigmented. Well, it's interesting because 5-6 years ago, I wouldn't have described this as a pigmented lip gloss, but I think we're so used to lip oils and all lip products having so much sheerness to them, like very, very, very little pigment, that in contrast to that, this feels really pigmented, but if anything, it's probably more just like a traditional lip gloss from maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And it reminds me of a traditional lip gloss also in the texture and the way it sits on the lips. So it's a little bit thick, it's a little bit sticky, it's definitely not a lip oil. And that's been part of the reason I'm just so on it. I prefer something a little bit more hydrating and nourishing on my lips. And I don't like the tint and the shade. This pink is not for me. Like when I did the demo clips before this and I had the pink on, I immediately took it off because I was like, I can't wear this anymore. I don't want to wear the video with the pink. I just don't like this shade on myself. But if you find a shade that you like, I don't think that these are bad, and it's nice to have the SPF in the lip gloss as something you're kind of touching up throughout the day. I think more brands will start doing SPF lip products. I think we're gonna see that, but for now, I don't think this one's bad, but not shouting from the rooftops about it. Some CoverGirl, they launched their new Eye Enhancer Mascara, and I've been wearing the Berry Brown shade, or is that the name of this? Yeah, Berry Brown, Berry Brown. I've been wearing this quite a bit. I didn't do it today, just because I was like, I don't wanna do the berry again today, but this is a like burgundy mascara. Even the name Berry Brown made me think it was gonna mostly translate as brown, but that was not my experience at all. I think it is very much a true burgundy mascara. It's pretty noticeable with that like red pigment to it. So I don't see everyone liking it necessarily for the shade, but they do have this also in a traditional brown and a black. So if you wanted more of a subtle tone, those are available as well. My favorite thing about this is the shade. The formula itself was definitely not a standout for me. I find that it gives decent volume, not much length, but the downside for me is that this just is too wet and will not hold a curl. Like my lashes will be curled before it, and then I apply it, they just straighten right back out. And granted, not many mascaras are efficient at holding a curl, but this one more so than others just cannot do it. But if that's not important to you, I do think this is a nice formula, especially if you're looking for volume. I just tend to prefer a mascara that's a lot wispier and better at holding my curl. CoverGirl also launched their Eye Enhancer Mono Palette. That's what they call this. I would call it a single shadow, but they launched this in the shade Rose Beam, and you saw me testing this out in my last drugstore video. I have this on my eyes also today, and I applied it with the sponge applicator. These sponge applicators don't tend to come in products that much anymore, but they're actually really wonderful for applying shimmers or glittery eyeshadows. Maybe not as effective on a matte shadow, but it's wonderful for applying a shimmer and getting a lot of intensity out of it. So I've actually been using the included applicator, and I really like this for an everyday eyeshadow. It's pretty subtle, but has a slight rosy champagne undertone to it. I only saw this available in one shade on Ulta though, which seemed a little bit funny because this is a pretty light, icy shade. I don't see it being ideal for everyone. But if you're looking for a champagne tone like this that is a little bit more subtle, I like how satin this is. Like, I wouldn't call it a shimmer, it's very much a satin, very refined, like not too shiny, but in a way that's very flattering to the eyelids. It's not gonna emphasize any texture that you have. I think it just smooths them out pretty well, and I've been wearing it a lot actually. Now we're moving on to the best of the best. These are my favorites and my highest recommendations out of this video. Starting with the Makeup by Mario one that I alluded to earlier. I don't think you should get the liquid bronzer. Instead, I would recommend the cream bronzer. So they just launched a new shade in this. This is the shade Fair. Previously they didn't have Fair, so like I said, I have the same shade in both of these, and Fair is perfect for me. It's such a wonderful bronzer shade because it's not too warm, it's not too cool. It's very subtle, but in a way that is visible, unlike this, where I feel like I'm not really even seeing it. This just gives you like the most natural glow to the skin. And I say glow, but I don't mean that in the sense of it being like shiny or glittery. None of that is here, but I just think it livens up the skin the way you want a bronzer to. It's so easy to work with, so easy to blend out. My only qualm with this is the same qualm I have with any of these sticks from Makeup by Mario. I hate the packaging, and actually most of his products, like, they just feel so cheap. The packaging does not match the price point or the quality. Like, this is a great formula. Not this. This is a great formula. You would never know by the packaging. It sounds like it's gonna break. Do you hear it rattling? And the reason for that is because on the opposite side, it has an included brush, but this brush isn't good. I wish that they would create this product without the brush so it was a little more stable in here. They could save a little money, hopefully pass that savings along to the product, maybe charge a little bit less for it and not have this brush, because this brush I don't think is great. The bristles are so short, I feel like I'm smacking my face with a rock trying to use this. Has these weird little bumps on it. I'm shocked that they included this brush, it's so bad. But the bronzer, I have not stopped using this. Every single day since I've gotten it, I have used it. He also launched a few new shades in the blush sticks, and the one I have been wearing constantly is the shade Soft Peach. This is also such an effortless formula to use. Now, you can apply it directly onto the skin, but what I do, like I said, with all of my cream products is I just pick it up on a brush and apply it like that. This is a very different formula than the Rhode ones. This is still creamy and blendable, but it's not as emollient as this one. But because of that, I find it easier to use because the product is staying where I'm putting it and it's not like blending away. Another liquid bronzer, and one I would again recommend over the Mario, is the Saie liquid bronzer. I've had this one for a while, but this is another one I haven't given an official update on, and I wanted to mention it today. So I have their liquid bronzer in the shade Sand, which is not the lightest shade. I actually probably would prefer the lightest shade, but they did send this to me and this was the shade they sent. But even still, I'm able to make this work just fine. Now with this, you have the doe foot, and obviously you could draw it directly onto the skin, but as I have said a million times, I don't tend to apply my liquids and creams like that. So I put it on the back of my hand and pick it up with a brush and work it into the skin. It has this beautiful glow to it. It looks very natural. It blends out effortlessly. Like if you like the dew blushes that they already make, you will really love this. It is such an easy to use bronzer formula. And out of a lot of the like new bronzers that just launched, like this one, the Makeup by Mario, and the Glossier one, which is also good, but this is my favorite out of all of them. And of course, the NYX Buttermelt blushes. So I've been raving about the Buttermelt bronzers all year, and they just launched, well, not just, I'm actually kind of late on this, but they did launch blushes, and I finally picked one up. I got the shade Butter Together, which is a bright pink, and I'm not even as into bright pinks these days as much as I used to be, but I still find myself really reaching for this one because it's beautiful on the skin. It also has the glowy quality that the Kosas has, but in a way that is smoother on the skin, that is less shimmery. Like I'm not really seeing the shimmer particles. Like this is giving me the result that I wanted from this, but it's like a third of the price. This is also very high pigment. You can definitely sheer it out and get less impact if you want, but you also get a lot of payoff right away. It's easy to work with, it's blendable. The Butter line from NYX, or the Buttermelt line, both the blushes and the bronzers, phenomenal. All right, those are my thoughts on all the products I've been testing out for a few months now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to use my code to get 10% off, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.